Hey Flosstube, this is Kim back again with another weekly cross-stitching update. Today is the 13th of April, 2020. This is video number 64, I believe. Yep. I hope everybody had a good Easter, as well as can be expected right now, and you'll have a good stitching week. I worked on 4 pieces this week, and kind of sort of have an FFO, which I'll explain to you when I show it. So the first piece that I worked on is Macintosh Mill by Dimensions, artwork by Charles Wysocki, and am working on this half of the design now. I did just shy of 2,000, equivalent 2,000 stitches, which is what I needed to finish the Glacier National Park for Full Coverage Fanatics National Park Challenge. It looks a little weird, but what I did is I finished up the sky and the clouds, which is all tent stitch. I did all the black, so you have this big building that kind of looks like it has a face. You have the church, the pie stand. This is going to be a person. Carriage with a horse drawn, the horse and the harness. And then there's 2 people over here. So I did all the black. I picked up this gray, which also went in the pie stand, finished the other gray, and a little bit of the blue. Was enough to finish Glacier. That's my second park on this one, so I am over 8,000 stitches into the Full Coverage Fanatics 20 in 20 challenge as well. I'm doubting that this piece will finish the 2020. I think I'll get a finish on this before I do the 20. I finish the 2020, but that's okay. I'll pick that up again in May. I also did my 1-day rotation on Templar Prophecy by Long Dog Samplers. I'm down here in this corner, and since I only worked at 1 day, I only stitched up more of this border, or the mountains under the night, if you will. And if I get closer, the model stitch here looks a little bit different than mine because I have not done the back stitching yet in that border. Long Dog Sampler does upload into Pattern Keeper, kind of. There's a few issues. You have to input a color, and not all the pages upload correctly. But by that I mean only 2 out of the, I don't know if there's 12 or 16 pages on that piece. Only 2 pages show the back stitch. So I just have to look at it as a PDF instead of Pattern Keeper to get where the back stitch is. So I did just shy of 700 stitches in 1 day, which I was, let's see if I can hold this up here. I did from about here, all of that in 1 day. And there's going to be back stitch in between those zigzags to bring everything together. Again, this is 32 count Lugana in Silvery Moon by Zweigart. It's a really pale blue, using the unlabeled flosses from Sue, the 94-year-old woman. Honoring Sue with all her beautiful floss. So I'll work on that again in May. And I also finished my commission piece, which was taking this zoo lineup by the trilogy and altering it to safari animals. So I had everything done except for the letters, and I had to rechart animals for these 3. I took out the panda, the penguin, and the swan, and picked out some safari animals to fit the theme for the baby. And then for this, the baby's first name in safari, like Kim's Safari, would have fit very nicely in this line for that baby boy. But the recipient wanted his first and middle name instead, which is fine, but it didn't take up as much space. So I centered it and then added a couple motifs on either side just to fill up that area. But you're not going to see the baby's name. So I asked through my friend to the recipient how she wanted me to finish it. Since we're stuck here at home, I had a couple different ways I could finish it myself, and I took pictures and explained it. The recipient opted just to have me mount it so I can ship it to her, and then she can get it framed however she wants to, which is perfectly fine. It's up to her. So yesterday was my first attempt at lacing. I've never done lacing. It turned out pretty good. I watched a couple different videos, including Stephanie from Lindy Stitches, her lazy lacing video, which is not a tutorial, but it did give me the idea that don't cut the thread that you're using while you're trying to lace. Just leave it on the spool and just keep pulling more instead of having to tie on more. So I mounted it on foam core, and there you see I added a cheetah, which hopefully looks enough like a cheetah, but also matches the aesthetic of the other animals, an ostrich, and a Cape buffalo. And I covered up baby's name, but you can see the little motifs I used to fill up the lines. And I'll show you my lacing job. I used number 8 Pro Cotton. I had quite a bit left from the ecru that I used on Camelot Sampler by Teresa Winsler last year, but I also had a whole nother roll of a different color. So I just went ahead and I used that color, and I opted to do the sides with the most fabric first, which was easier. And thank God this is foam core, because this part was harder since there wasn't as much fabric. And I used pins to kind of secure it down just enough so I can get the stitches in before I started tightening it. So I'm glad I used foam core for that. But there's plenty of lacing tutorials on YouTube for you to try it. So tomorrow I will go to the post office here on base, make a 5-minute trip, and have big pieces of cardboard on either side of this so it doesn't get smashed in the mail, and ship it off to California. So that is my kind of sort of FFO. And then the last piece I worked on, I told you I wanted to work on something that I hadn't yet touched this year. So I pulled out from the Joan Elliott Christmas Treasures book the Christmas roly-polies. I started this last year for Magical Stitches prompt, and I had Mrs. Claus, all of her red, her green mittens done, some of her gray, and then I also have Santa's hat started. So this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I also worked on this, but come to find out my stitchy bug wasn't really up to stitching on perforated plastic. Wasn't interested. So I only worked on it in the evenings after my girls went to bed for the last 2 nights. That means under 400 stitches because it's perforated plastic. So I'm using 3 strands, no loop start, and I have to stitch one-handed instead of two-handed. So it's slower going, but it's still progress. However, I'm not going to work on it. I'm not going to force myself to work on this when I spent so much time reading this weekend instead of stitching on this, because I knew this is what I had to work on. So I just read and read and read instead of stitching. So what I did on Mrs. Claus, I didn't touch Santa at all. I finished the gray bits in her collar, cuff, and hat, and I did all the white and started on the gingerbread man. So that's progress on her. Originally, I thought I could finish them both in 2020. I'm not going to force myself to do that because I don't want to kill my stitchy bug just to meet a goal. So we will see how much progress they get in 2020, but it's no longer going to be a finish goal. Maybe I can just finish Mrs. Claus. I don't know. I got lots of other things I'd rather work on. And let's see. So plans plans for the next week to feed my stitchy bug and get me back into it instead of reading as much. I need to get back into full coverage. I was going to work on Trick or Treat at the end of the month for the Full Coverage Fanatics Easter Egg Challenge weekend, which is over Jesse's birthday. I think it's the 24th through the 26th. It's the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday dates. But I might pull it out this week, just because I haven't worked on it since last year, and I need to feed my bug. And if I want to get a park done, I can't do a whole park in 3 days. So, Trick or Treat. I haven't done my monthly rotation on Big Red Ship of Life yet, so I owe that 3 days. And then I might work on my black work. But we'll see. We'll see what the week brings. And then last little bit of stitchy content. Over a month ago, before the self-quarantine happened, I bought a magazine from Barnes & Noble, which is in our mall. And I only bought it for one pattern. So this is the February issue of World of Cross Stitch, or World of Cross Stitching. And so everything is love related. And I only wanted it for one pattern. I was looking through the magazine and I found a pattern that Anne of Fiber Floss and the Fiction Podcast would like. So I plan on ripping those pages out and mailing it to her. So I figured if I'm ripping pages out, I might as well see if any of you guys want the remaining patterns in here that I can send you without like splitting a pattern. So I marked some pages. Most of these I can mail from my house without going to the post office. So we'll do 2 weeks to tell 2 weeks for this giveaway. And the pages I can send, I can do that from my house. What I'm not sure if I can accurately predict the postage is the kit that came with the magazine. This is a bookmark that says Wild at Heart. It has the Ada, the floss, and the little pink border. It's actually, it's not a border. It's folded, so you can actually like use some double-sided tape and put it in there so you have the border, but it's also got a backing on it. So kind of cool. But I don't know what my postage would be for this, especially if someone international wins it. So, but I can always save your information and send it whenever we're released. The other thing about this is that the pattern is in this kit as well as in the magazine. So I can send the page to someone and I can send the kit to somebody else legally. So the person who just gets the page with the pattern, on the back of that page, they get a second pattern of Flossie the Mouse wearing a cute little dress. What little girl wouldn't like to see a little mouse like that on a card? So you can say, I'd like to stitch the flowers as a bookmark if you're interested in the kit, or I'd like to stitch the flowers and mouse if you just want the pattern, or flowers if you want to be in both. We have Taddy the Teddy holding hearts. So I'd like to stitch the teddy bear, or I'd like to stitch Taddy, if you like that one. If you're into tea, you have this piece. It says, tea is always best with good friends. Now, both of those blue banners are full coverage, but there's no reason why you can't eliminate the banners, just do a border, and then change the color of the words so you don't have to stitch all that background. Designer there is Siobhan Harrison. So I'd like to stitch the teapot. Here's the pattern I'm going to send to Anne. She likes foxes. So there's a fox amongst the flowers. And that one has cross stitch fractionals, backstitch, lazy daisies, French knots, and sequins. Okay, the next one is smalls for like cards, bookmarks, that kind of thing. It's lots of different geometric shapes and patterns. So I can show you a couple of different pages of models on this one. So this is Fiona Baker. I like to stitch the geometrical shapes. There's 42 little motifs on these pages, but these are the ones that I have stitched up. And let's see. If you have any little boys that like space or anyone that likes little aliens, here's a set of 6 card designs. It says, Valentine, you're a blast. You're one in a universe. Let's never put space between us. Love you to the moon and back. Valentine, you're out of this world. And I'd travel the universe with you. So really cute little alien design cards. I'd like to stitch the aliens. Alright, the next 2 are either or because they share a page. So there's this cute panda with flowers and heart balloons, but his chart shares a page with the model stitch of this Maria Diaz, the bride. She's gorgeous, just not something I would stitch. She's a big girl. Her pattern is 4 pages, and oops, I messed up my paper clips. Her stitch count is 150 by 130. So that's the bride. Here's the pattern I wanted. These cute little egg cozies by Rana Nori. So there's Vikings and knights, and looks like a Spartan and a soldier and an Indian. I would not make egg cozies. I just make little smalls. Pillow ornaments or something. I don't know when, but I wanted the pattern. So, alright. If you want any of those, let me know. As I said, 2 weeks. I will leave the giveaway open. And I can mail the paper patterns, except for the kit, from my house. So that is all my stitching content. If you don't want to hear Air Force stories, then I will see you later. See you next week. Okay, Air Force stories. Last week I was explaining the Mission Ready Airmen, the MRA program, that was part of my detachment command at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona. Where we taught brand new airmen maintainers how to be crew chiefs to the F-16, how to launch it, catch it, service the jet, do inspections on the jet before flight and after flight. Well, these students, like I said, their course at Luke was about 30 days, and then they would graduate and go to their first duty station. And I attended every single graduation that I could. Very seldom that I couldn't make it. My senior master sergeant in the detachment also attended, as well as the maintenance group commander at Luke or his deputy. They were the ones to actually hand over the certificate of graduation, and they always, gave a speech at the end to congratulate them and help get them ready to go. Get them both inspired and wisdom, if you will. Well, I was at the detachment for 3 years, and I told you before that squadron commanders, group commanders, wing commanders, any type of commander, they're usually only there for 2 years, both for their own professional development so they continue to grow, and for the unit, so the unit always has fresh leadership. Well, 1 year after we arrived at Luke, my husband changed career fields. So he left Luke, and I was still there. He started going to different bases for his cross training to become part of the operator side of things. So I was still at Luke, and there was no good reason for me to move from the detachment to the maintenance group at Luke once I hit the 2-year point, when they knew that once my husband was done with his training, I would be PCSing, leaving Luke Air Force Base to go join him wherever he is, because The Air Force tries to keep joint spouse is what they call it, together as much as possible. But, you know, while my husband was actually training, that just wasn't, you know, where he was going was only temporary. So we were waiting for him to actually find out what airframe he would be on and get his next duty station so I could go to where he was. So I stayed in the detachment for longer than the regular 2 years. I was there for like 2 years and 10 months. It was just not even 10 months. 2 years and 11 months. It was real close to 3 years. So I got to, you know, I attended a lot of MRA graduations, and I was there over the span of 2 different group commanders at Luke. And the second group commander that I got to know pretty well, he had his graduation speech to the Mission Ready Airmen almost down word for word. He had a specific story that he told them with a lesson learned, and it was a good story. It was a funny story, but at the same time, we heard it, like my senior master sergeant and I heard it sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, because that's how many graduations we would have. Whereas the actual instructors of each course, they only had to hear it about once a month, because every time they had a class graduate is when they heard it. But we got to hear it lots. And 10 years later, like, it's been 10 years since I left the detachment, and I can still hear him saying the speech in my head with his story. It stuck out. It sticks with you, which is one reason why he was so good at giving some words of wisdom to the airmen. So I'm going to attempt, of course it's not going to be as good as he did it, I'm going to attempt to tell the story. So we're going to call him Jeff. When Jeff was a young lieutenant, driving around, I don't remember what state he was in, but he had some car problems. And, you know, being a maintainer, he liked to work on his car. So he had like a Chilton's Guide, or I forgot there's another brand name. You can buy tech data for your car. It'll tell you how to do all kinds of different jobs on your car. How to do step by step each thing, depending on, you know, if you're changing the oil, whatever. He had the same dirt smudge pages from, you know, keeping it open whenever he changed the oil. He would follow it step by step. How to change the oil in your car, or just changing different things. Well, he was driving along one day, and all of a sudden he developed a transmission leak. And he was leaving a trail, transmission fluid everywhere he went. And eventually, he limped his car home. He knew exactly how to fix it. He had took somebody else's car and got what he needed, just like $1.50 seal. All he had to do was disconnect that drive shaft, put in the new seal, reconnect the drive shaft. He'd be good to go. He'd be done in 30 minutes. It is a simple job. So he parked his car in the driveway and crawled underneath it and started trying to disconnect that drive shaft. Well, it just wouldn't budge. He couldn't get it out. So he went to his toolbox, and you know when you buy that set of screwdrivers, there's that really big screwdriver that seems to have no earthly purpose except to use as a lever, because there's just no reason for a screwdriver this long. So he, crawled back under that car, used that screwdriver, trying to pry that drive shaft out of the transmission. And pried, and eventually it came loose. The great big pop. And as soon as it did, the car started rolling. And it rolled down the driveway and into the street, where eventually it stopped when it hit the curb. By the grace of God, he didn't die that day. He could have been angled like underneath the car, so the car would have rolled over his legs. But he wasn't, his legs were forward or backward on the car, so it just rolled right over him instead of the wheels over his legs. It could have hit somebody out in the street. Luckily, no one was driving. and he realized his mistake. He was so confident that he knew exactly how to do that job, it didn't even dawn on him to check his tech data. He wasn't using it at all. He knew exactly what he had to do was change that seal on that drive shaft. But what happened, as soon as he disconnected that drive shaft, he disconnected the only thing keeping that car in park. When he checked the tech data for his car, step 1, set the parking brake. Step 2, chalk the vehicle, the little wooden blocks you put around the tires so they don't move. So obvious, he didn't even think to check his tech data. So his point for the students going out to be new F-16 crew chiefs is to always use your tech data. For airplanes in the Air Force, we have tech data for every single job. I didn't realize it for about the first 3 years at Seymour. I knew all about tech data. I didn't realize there was tech data to include how to launch the jet. There was a step-by-step how to launch the jet. But the squadrons I was in, they didn't really enforce tech data usage for how to launch a jet. For one, you can't have a book out when you have engines running and jets taxiing by because it could blow away. So the thing to do is to have it out, put it in the toolbox where there's room in the drawer, and close it, and then you can open it when you need it and then close it again so the tech data doesn't blow away. There's tech data for every single job on the airplane. So Jeff's point was, don't become complacent and always use your tech data. It will save lives, and it does. There's what we call notes, warnings, and cautions in tech data. Notes are like just like an advisory. Cautions and warnings. Warnings will get you, is if you don't do this, it will kill you. Cautions, or it can injure you. Is literally, depending on if it's a note, warning, or caution, is what the outcome could be. How seriously it could hurt you. So his point is to always use your tech data. So that was just a real cool thing. In the classroom where we had all the graduations, just a regular classroom, nothing special about it. But because, we were handing over certificates, it was a momentous point in their Air Force career. We always had a flag. And the flag was just, on a pole, on a base, just up against the wall. So we'd have a flag there. Well, before I left the detachment, I knew that the MRA guys replaced their flag. I just thought the other one was getting old. They were replacing it. But they were keeping a secret from me. They knew I was leaving. And every time you leave a unit, whether, like at Seymour, every time I would change squadrons, you'd get going away gifts, farewell gifts, from the flightline squadron that you were in, or if you were in one of the back shops, like I was the maintenance operations officer, I'd get gifts from every flight. So we have lots and lots of, since both my husband and I were maintenance, lots of farewell gifts, and we could decorate the whole house in it. So the house is not just cross-stitch, it's Air Force, and then of course this room is horses. There's more horses that you can't see. But my farewell gift from the MRA guys is the flag that was sitting in that classroom. This is not just any normal flag. If you know the ceremonial flags that are in big like conference rooms and stuff, they have the gold fringe on them all the way around. This is one of those. So it's a huge flag. It's really crammed in there. And then just a plaque with my name and the dates that I was at the detachment. Here, this is the det patch and the fighter wing patch for Luke, saying, from the men and women of MRA, thanks for your hard work and leadership. You will be missed. And then as an inside joke, it says, you're fired. Because that was one of the things I did with my guys and the couple girls that were there, is I would pretend fire them if they forgot to do something, which, you know, hardly ever happened. Just like, you're fired. Get out of here. So that's one of the neat going away gifts that I have. The other thing I have to show you, I've got 2 pictures I got to squeeze in here quickly. I have a unit picture of the detachment and all of us. This is out in front of a display jet. This is not an operational jet. This is like, you go into the Air Force Base, you always have jets on sticks or jets on the ground that are just to show the heritage of that wing, what kinds of airplanes they've flown. So this is Phoenix. Of course, there's palm trees. And the Air Force was changing uniforms at the moment. So we were a mix of BDUs and ADUs. That's me. That's my senior master sergeant. I had about 4 master sergeants, and the rest were staffs and tech sergeants. Again, there's about 50 of them. That's me, all my instructors, and my MTLs. This picture means a lot to me because I worked hand in hand pretty well with these guys for 3 years. And there's a sad part to this picture too, but that's for another day. The other picture I have to show you is not related to the detachment at all. This past week, we've talked about different safety incidents. This past week, there was an A-10 down in Georgia that had an in-flight emergency. I'm guessing it was a hydraulic failure of some sort. It was just flying around doing a normal training sortie and had to have an emergency landing at a base in Georgia with no landing gear. So he did a belly landing. No injuries to the pilot whatsoever. And the aircraft looks in pretty good shape. So this was an illegal picture that got posted to the internet, which I found. This shouldn't have been publicly released, but so A-10 on the ground. You see there's no canopy, and that's because when you do a belly landing, one of the procedures is to blow the canopy. So there are explosive charges to, like if you were to punch out when the airplane is flying, you can do that from the ground as well to quickly egress the airplane. So the pilot blew the canopy. It's probably on the other side on the grass where you can't see it. Probably shattered as well. And, but, so I don't know what the safety investigation will leave to that. It probably will be a Class A just because of aircraft structural damage. But he did an excellent job landing that airplane to minimize the damage and injury. Bye guys. Have a good week.